And we're here to talk about trip integration. So, what is integration? I always like to open up with a little bit of a story, a little narrative, because I think it helps us to dive into connection. And I was thinking the other day, I had this very pertinent moment of integration for myself. I've been practicing yoga for about 20 years, and recently I've had an issue where I can't plank, I can't do toe balances, and I went to the podiatrist, they did x-rays, and some bones in my foot have moved. And so the podiatrist suggested I modify my practice. And so I went into practice, and I was really trying to think my way through and really kind of augment what I was doing. And I felt really depressed. And I felt like more pain in my foot, actually, than I typically do. And I was like, wow, that was a really interesting experience. I feel so fragmented after yoga instead of super integrated, super harmonized. And I work with this wonderful woman who does some personal training with me. And I was explaining to her what was happening. And she went into some movement with me, and she asked me to do something. I said, I can't do that. She said, oh, okay, we're going to try this. And all of a sudden I realized, oh, I can trust my friend to do that thinking for me. And all of a sudden I was realizing that my body was able to relax into movement again. And I didn't have to think, because I was integrating with her thinking brain integrated with my body. And I was able to find harmony again in movement and find a way to go into my exercise routine that didn't create more fragmentation and quite literally depression, immobilization. And so I wanted to just share that, integration is something that has to do with valuing all of the different parts that are present, the pain that was present, right? The history of my practice, right? This friend of mine who was there, who's so knowledgeable about the body. I could have gone in a defensive place of I can't do anything and I can't trust because of the pain that comes up. It will create that psychological attachment to distrust and fear, right? But I went into being able to identify all of the different parts that were available to me in that moment. And I realized they started communicating with each other. And then harmonization happened. And then I felt embodied. And so it's really important to understand that when we talk about integration, we know that there's all these different parts that have individual value. And once we see the separate parts and respect them, including for me in that moment, the pain, right? That was a part of the story there. And I almost wanted to erase the history part of my 20 years of practicing yoga, because it felt just so depressing and debilitating to not be able to, right, access all of what I had been learning all of those years. But that history was really important, right? So we have to see all of these different parts coming together and respect them. And when they start communicating with each other instead of competing with each other, harmonization happens, weaving happens. And that's what integration is about. It's a process that happens both intrapersonally, which is collaboration within your own mind body, as well as interpersonally, which is collaboration with others. When we are integrated, we are in our most evolved neurological states. No one part is more important than the other. When we are integrated, our capacity is exponentially increased. And if we're not integrated interpersonally, it's super difficult to integrate interpersonally, right? So we want to make sure that we're creating a harmonious environment within so that we can then create harmonies in between. Because we're not isolated species, we're not an isolated species as humans. We are interconnected, much like the mycelium networks are. So it's really important that we understand that and utilize that so that we can feel as expanded as possible.
And I want to speak on that if we're not integrated intrapersonally, it's super difficult to integrate interpersonally. I, I was just speaking to a client about this the other day where, it's really becoming more and more of a reality for me that we live in a mirror universe. And the medicine has really shown me that. And so, if the best way to connect to other people is to connect back to your own heart. And if you can connect to your own heart and be kind and open with yourself, then it's incredible how open-hearted you can be with others, and the connection is there. So it really always comes back to the work that you're doing inside. What you're integrating with yourself is a reflection of how you can integrate on the outside with other people, in other situations.
Beautifully said.
Thanks.
Yeah. And if we talk about integration, then we also have to talk about the inverse, which is fragmentation, right? Most people live in a fragmented, disintegrated state. We can see that when we experience insecurity, people as being compulsive, reactive, unable to think, unable to feel, anxious, scared, judgmental, untrusting, selfish, self-centered, scarce, the feeling of scarcity, impatient, constricted, disorganized, rigid, chaotic. Those are all fragmented states. And if we can recognize that one of those states is present, then we can understand that there's some integration that we're needing to do, that there's some value to that feeling that's coming up, right? Maybe it's fear. Maybe it's selfishness. It's coming up for a reason. We want to value it. We don't want to push it away. We don't want to judge it. We don't want to say that's bad. That's information that your body's bringing up that's saying, hey, pay attention to me, so that another part of you can say, oh, I see you, I feel you, and hey, I've got some solutions. Or if we mix a little bit of this in, we can create a different recipe. And then we can see that the integrated states can start coming in, and we can feel more peaceful and balanced and loving and compassionate. We know that we're in an integrated place when we could be thoughtful and mindful and organized, when we could have focus, when there's reciprocity, when there's generosity, a sense of abundance. If we're flexible, if we're open, if we're patient, if we're creative, if we're in flow, we know we have reached some point of integration. Right. And so these are some markers to be aware of, to understand, am I fragmented or am I integrated? And if I'm fragmented, what is this piece? What is this fragmented piece that is coming up really strongly, that's overriding all these other parts that are there, but we just can't access them yet? So that fragmentation means I need to value what's coming up strongly so that we can soothe it a little bit, right? And I like to think of integration as weaving, because I think putting some action to these complex ideologies or these complex neurological states, it's important to know that there's some action that we can take, that we're all kind of aware of what the feeling of weaving really is. That's what integration is all about. It's weaving. It's weaving a tapestry. It's creating connections between different parts. The unconscious with the conscious, the cognitive with the somatic, thoughts with emotions, and therefore amygdala with prefrontal cortex. For those of you who may not have heard those terms, amygdala is the part of the limbic system that is kind of the smoke alarm of the brain. And so it's a real signal of fragmentation when the amygdala is screaming, hey, something's not okay, anxiety, 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 danger. And it will literally flip the prefrontal cortex offline. And so we aren't able to think. And it's a real moment of fragmentation when the amygdala comes on and goes, nope, we're not thinking now. You need to feel this. And then we can slow down, because the amygdala is faster than the prefrontal cortex. We could slow it down, do a little breathing perhaps, and wait for thought to come back in, so that thought can mix with emotion, so that internal experience can weave with external experience. Memories can weave with mindful presence, such that a new third frequency is born. So whenever we have two things coming together, the harmony between those two things creates a third thing. It's like creating a child, right? And you could weave and integrate 4 parts together, 6 parts together, right? It doesn't just have to be 2, but the purpose of this is to understand that when we bridge different parts together, something else gets born. And that's a really important thing to understand when we're talking about the concept of integration.
Integration and psychedelics. Let's just go to the next slide and I'll get into a story.
Okay, great.
So many insights come from a psychedelic experience on both macro and micro level. Patterns become apparently clear, root sources of patterns surface, new perspectives emerge, new emotional qualities are experienced in relationship to the patterns, such as awe, curiosity, and compassion. AKA, more information is often revealed with psychedelic experience that otherwise would have remained buried, unseen, and therefore would remain in the subconscious forces unknowingly in the driver's seat of our lives. And it's true that, our subconscious drives most of our behavior. We are slaves to our subconscious. And when we don't know what's going on in our subconscious, it's like walking around life blindfolded and bumping into the same walls over and over again and not understanding why. I'm sure many people have experienced, oh, shoot, I dated someone terrible again. Why do I keep doing this? Or, oh, shoot, why didn't I speak up for myself at my job again? How come I keep putting myself in this position where I'm doing work for everybody? It's different for everybody, but we have these patterns in our subconscious that drive us. And the patterns in our subconscious that drive us are trying to find repair. We are walking in these circles trying to find repair, but there's no repair when you're walking in a circle blindfolded. That's where psychedelics come in, macro level and micro level. It starts revealing your programs to you. It starts revealing your patterns to you. It starts bringing back core memories. I cannot tell you how often I've seen people say, oh, I remembered this moment from my childhood that was really, really a moment where I made a decision about having to protect myself moving forward. The psychedelics don't give you new information. They remind you. They make you remember what you already knew all along. And in the peak experience, you really remember that you are love, that you are a miracle, and that really the only thing wrong with you is that you don't know that there's nothing wrong with you. The awe and the curiosity and the compassion that can come out of, an amazing mushroom trip can be equally healing as the excavating, as the bringing up those core memories of being like, oh, I see this pattern, because I really believe that awe is very healing. It's very life affirming. And it's something to keep plugging forward for. So as I mentioned, there's a difference between macro and micro, and I'll get into macro first. It's pretty straightforward with the macrodose journey. You have all this information that you're remembering, all these new insights that are coming up for you. And, you make decisions in a journey as well. There's decisions that are made when you are becoming whole and when you're fragmenting. So the decisions that you make on a journey that are trying to make you more embodied and whole and integrated, they need to be put into action post journey. Okay, so here's an example. I once had a beautiful psilocybin journey where I was speaking to a tree. It was an orange tree, and I picked the orange off of it. I started eating the orange, and it hit me really hard. The earth gives. The earth gives and only asks that we respect it in return, and we're not. And I looked down and I saw a few feet away from the orange tree, a plastic bottle. And in that moment, I made a decision. I am not going to drink out of plastic bottles anymore. Now, there's been the occasional emergency where I was thirsty and that's all that was around, but I really have made an effort in my life to integrate that moment. And lo and behold, I only drink out of glass now whenever I can. That is an integration of a macro journey. And that could be something very pragmatic. I want to exercise more. I want to do yoga more. I want to stop drinking out of plastic bottles. And then there's the interpersonal stuff. I want to be kinder to service workers. I want to be kinder to my spouse. I want to be more patient with my child. And it's really in the doing that turns the intention into integration. It's in the action, it's in the doing. And that's where really the rewiring truly starts coming in. For the micro, the journey is in the walk a day. So, as you guys may know, we're a microdosing company. We speak to many, many people about this every single day. And the beauty of the microdosing is that it's in real time, the integration. So you're getting the brain plasticity, you're getting the information on more of a micro level every single day into more digestible bits. And it's in those moments where the rubber meets the road. Okay, so I have this medicine in my system, but I'm still able to go to my work. I'm still able to show up for my family. I'm still being able to do these things, but I'm doing them more intentionally. I'm doing them in a more present way. I'm noticing I'm able to pause before speaking. I'm noticing that I'm more of an observer in my life. Let me see what it's like to really lean into this. I'm feeling joy. I'm going to feel it in my body in my day-to-day life. And feeling it in your body versus just thinking about it is a huge part of integration and a huge part of healing and a huge part of embodiment. So macro, bigger, life-altering changes can occur, but integration is reliant on recall. Micro, less reliant on recall and mirrors the shaping procedures that we learn best for long-lasting change.
Yeah, and to jump in there, from a behavioral perspective, when we talk about the science of learning, something that's so important to take into consideration is how do we reinforce long-term learning, lasting learning, not just, oh, I started this little habit and dropped it 2 weeks later, right? It happens through shaping. It happens through these tiny little subtle changes that get reinforced over time. And we realize, oh, that worked. Oh, I got the result. I got to the desired effect when I did that. Let me do it again. And this time I'm going to do it a little differently. And this time I'm going to do it in this environment with this person. And so we start to generalize this new behavior across environments, across people, across stimuli. And suddenly we see there's a whole neural network, a whole relational frame, a framework that is built upon this new behavior. And that neural network, when reinforced and practiced repeatedly, gets myelinated, right? These neural networks that start out a little crunchy, with the reinforcement, with the repetition, there's this beautiful coating of fat that comes along with the reinforcement and with the rest and digestion and with meditation. Myelination occurs. And so over time, these little shaped behaviors become huge, lifelong changes.
And one way that a macro journey can really be integrated is to maybe not immediately, because you want to integrate your macro journey, but eventually leaning into the micro journey to keep your heart open, to keep your brain plastic, and to continue to get the fruits of what you remembered on your macro journey. So, steps for intention, integration, all of it. So in the micro, you set an intention. It's really recommended that you have someone to speak to about your intentions, because there's something about stating them that really puts them out in the air. So you set your intention, whatever your intention may be. The next step is to feel and experience the intention, because an intention alone is not enough. So feeling it in your body, feeling it in your nervous system, what would it feel like to have this intention come to fruition in my life? What would it feel like to get along better with my spouse? What would it feel like to go jogging every morning? You just feel and experience it. Then there's the noticing, the reflecting, the narrating. It's putting a story to it. right? Because we are already living in a story, and, you know, mushrooms can really flip up that story, that old story that we have, into the air, and the words are all over the place, and we get to put the words back together in the order that we want to live out our intention.
Mm.
You know, and that's why we also recommend journaling, you know, and that actually applies for macro or micro journaling, speaking to someone, having someone reflect you back to you to really, really get a cohesive narrative going. And then our favorite part, the experimentation, the play, the change, you know, what am I going to do with this new perspective? How can I integrate it into my life in a playful way? How can I experiment? You know, I was talking to Victoria this morning about the time that, you know, I was really getting into this work, and I noticed that I felt perfectly comfortable walking into a party that was in the neighborhood and saying hello to people and introducing myself. And that's something I would have never done before because I was so in my default mode network. And look, sometimes I still visit that place, but the possibility is there. I showed myself that the possibility is there. I showed myself that I have choice. And I showed myself that taking a risk can pay off because I had a wonderful time. And these things kind of fractal out into more and more bravery in your life. And it opens up your world. And the more open your world is, the more possibility there is. And that's why setting an intention and integrating it somatically and cognitively is just so important, but really the most through action in your life.
Yeah. And, you know, between these steps, setting the intention, feeling it somatically, narrating it and noticing it cognitively, experimenting and getting into play where you're interactive, you're bringing up so many different parts of the self, so many different parts of the brain have to be online to be able to do all of those different things that are linked back to that initial intention. And so going through these steps, you could see we're weaving multiple parts of the brain into communication to create that harmony. So there's always this question, can I integrate alone or do I need a specialist? And, you know, what is so important to understand is that we exist in relationship. And therefore, it is much more difficult to fully integrate new perspective and ways of thinking, feeling, and behaving when you're in isolation. A specialist is going to offer you tools that you may not have been aware of, or offer ways of using such tools that may not have seemed obvious to you. That being said, not having an integration specialist is, of course, an option if you're not seeking to make big change, but you're seeking to play and you're seeking to experience wonder and awe and to be able to expand the comfort zone a little bit, right? And stretch yourself a little bit. You know, we don't need a therapist, an integration specialist to do that with us, although we do want to stress if you are looking to make big change, and especially if the change that you're looking to make is related to trauma, if it's related to some really old wounds, if it's related to some really serious addictive patterns, for example, you're going to want to work with someone who is an expert in this to really help to reinforce new ways of existing in the world that are outside of that defense mode pattern that you found yourself in, that at one time has really kept you safe. But now we're realizing, oh my God, this is actually prohibiting me from being more in my life, right? And so we're wanting to step outside of that comfort zone. You're going to want a specialist to do that with you.
What happens if you don't integrate? Well, less learning, AKA less lasting change, lasting being the operative word. Parts remain in isolation, which means still fragmentation. Parts don't learn how to harmonize with each other, and therefore the feeling of certain parts of the self taking over will overwhelm the nervous system. And that's kind of part of like why people have some challenging experiences. New connections that emerge in the psychedelic experience won't have an opportunity to be reinforced in the walk a day. And neural pathways don't get practice myelinated. What I want to say about not integrating your journeys or your work with the mushroom is that it's very much like planting a seed, but never watering it.
Mm.
You planted the seed, it's in the soil and it's ready to grow, but the integration is so much the watering and watching it grow over time. And this is the piece that a lot of people new to the space, coming into like this new paradigm of psychedelic medicine, misunderstand, and that's that it's not a quick instant fix. You may be able to do the medicine or sit with the medicine and feel really good for a week after, 2 weeks after, but if you want it to be lasting change, you got to water the seed and watch it grow over time. It's a marathon, it's not a sprint. And the other piece is, if you never integrate your journeys, you're going to start teaching yourself that the journeys don't create lasting change, which changes your relationship with the medicine. It changes your ability to set an intention for everlasting change because you keep reinforcing, oh, this isn't going to work for me long term. This isn't going to work for me long term. Whereas if you do integrate it, it does last long term. And again, it opens up so much more possibility. So it can really create a feedback loop of the medicine kind of eventually kicking you out, saying, I've given you everything that I have to give you. You have to go do the work. You have to go integrate this. It's really teamwork between you and the medicine.
Mm.
The medicine without hitting your nervous system it exists in a vacuum. Your nervous system without the medicine is your nervous system as you know it. It's when they merge together that the alchemy really happens. And it's up to you to keep it going.
Mm. So
I was going to say, Dr. Victoria and I get really excited about this. Go ahead.
so it's interesting. I didn't mention this before and meant to. The father of interpersonal neurobiology is a scientist named Dan Siegel. And he did a lot of research on how there's all of these different activities that actually are creating more integrative brain states, that if we experience certain kinds of activities, more parts of the brain light up at once than others. And so we put together some of these tools because it's helpful to understand that these are things that you can be doing and incorporate into your life pretty easily. They're things that you can be doing during a macrodose journey. And they're also things that we can be doing while we're microdosing to help give you the most out of your experience.
Breath. Intentional breathing and microdosing assists you in getting embodied and shifts you from sticky thoughts to more flowy experiencing. When intentionally breathing, your mind and body are integrated and you move through overwhelm much faster. And of course, this also can apply to macrodosing, moving through some of the feeling states when you're on a journey. The intentional breathing harmonizes many parts of the brain and the body, improves heart rate variability, relaxes the nervous system, and oxygenates the heart. And I want to touch on heart rate variability for a moment. People are always saying that, it's about being in a parasympathetic nervous state as opposed to just a sympathetic nervous state. And the goal is to go into parasympathetic, where the goal actually is a good mix to give you good heart rate variability, which gives you more ability to cope in life.
Yeah, so we want to be able. Sorry, go for it, Rom.
I was just going to say the breath really embodies you and it takes you out of just the cognition. It really puts you in your body. So next time you're feeling like you're looping in your thoughts, try softening your belly and just breathing into it and breathing into it, or putting your hand on your heart and breathing into it. I have a heart. I am more than just a brain. This is another brain. This is another brain. Let's connect to other brains in our bodies. And puts you really in the moment, helps you be super present. And being present is about slowing down. It's about breath. It's about embodiment, really. So sorry, Victoria, go ahead.
No, yeah. And I was just going to say, piggybacking off of what you're saying with heart rate variability, we want to be able to flow between those two states, right? Because sympathetic is more of that active coping, and the parasympathetic is more rest, digest. And so we think, well, I'm typically out in the world fighting or fleeing all over the place. We want to try and get to rest and digest, but we need that fight, right? Just as much as we need to rest. And so it's being able to shift between the two really easily, which breath can really help us do. And we're actually going to do a little exercise with this in just a moment. But first, we'll get into the second piece of some integrative tools, which is movement. Stress and trauma are stored in the body. The body keeps the score. I hope that you all have read that book. Exercise like yoga and dancing can help activate your microdose and your macrodose and move the stuck energy within you. And we like to say, do be sure to turn up the music for full movement magic, because we really want to connect, integrate with sound, with rhythm. Our bodies have that heartbeat. We have our own rhythm. We are very rhythmic as a species. And it's really important that we can play with different sounds while we're moving to integrate sound and musculature somatic movement. Movement produces feel-good neuromodulators like serotonin and other endorphins. It lowers stress hormones like cortisol. It can trigger reward systems and a sense of accomplishment, and it will soothe the amygdala, which is going to de-escalate some of that anxiety that comes from high amygdalic activity.
Not to mention, movement really helps digestion, which helps gut health, which now we're learning is a big piece of our mental health.
Yeah.
Movement. Yeah. Nature. Microdosing loves connecting us with nature, our larger sense of embodiment. We can attune with nature or co-regulating our nervous system, helping us shift into an organic, grounded state, and can open up new levels of consciousness. Nature puts you in your situations into perspective. It reminds you of the beauty in the world is you, and you are it. You are nature. Resets your digitally induced pacing, slows you back down to the rhythm of the earth. And I think what's become a new favorite part of connecting with nature for me is getting away from my phone.
Yeah.
And you know, the irony is not lost on me that many of us that work in the medicine space are constantly on our phone, partially because of the medicine space. So it's really up to us as, you know, people in this space to really take care of ourselves too, so that we can help others, because help others help themselves rather, because our cup has to be full. And one of the most important things that mushrooms ask of us is to remember nature, is to remember that we are nature. I hearken back to the story I told a few slides ago with the tree, you know, and I do believe that our bodies are built to be in rhythm with the earth. It's not a coincidence that the moon cycle and the menstrual cycle are the same. It's not a coincidence that we're made of 70% water. The earth is made of 70% water. There are so many things in nature that mirror who we are, and we mirror what it is. And there's a lot of wisdom in nature. Nature is so full of metaphors. It is so full of metaphors. It's, you know, how the trees and the mycelium network, and they share information and they share nutrients, just like a community of people. We want to strive to be like that. We want to strive to mimic nature. And when we don't mimic nature, it's really where we're losing our way.
Yeah. And so, you know, get out there, go for a hike, go to the beach, put your feet in the water. And if you don't have access to nature in that bigger way, water your plants, get a house plant, right? Even just watering a house plant really puts you in tune with that sense of absorption and flow, and being able to offer that to the plant. Pet your cat, right? Just get yourself animals, right? Anything that gives you access to the natural organic world. Affirmations are another one. You know, they're really important because we do run on memory. And Rome touched on this earlier, that most of the time we are literally just running on memory. I like to give the example of brushing the teeth because it's something hopefully everyone's doing every day, twice a day. And, I don't have to think about the steps of brushing my teeth. I just brush my teeth, right? If I didn't have those memories to run on, it would be really debilitating. But that being said, if we are constantly running on memories and letting our thoughts recycle every day, which most of us are, then you're never experiencing change. You're never going to get to a new place. And so affirmations, they're really kind of easy way to reframe and rewire our survival mode, negative thought patterns by getting clear on the underlying desire beneath the surface of the painful thought. So a thought like, I'm all alone, can turn into, what do we want? What is that statement saying? It's saying we want connection. So the affirmation is, I am opening to connection. Instead of telling yourself, I'm alone, I'm alone, I'm alone. I'm opening to connection that gets us into a place where we're ready to seek what we desire. Microdosing can give us the brain plasticity to prime us for such learning. Macrodosing does as well. And we want to be able to work with that plastic state to really implant some new thoughts. But know this part of rewiring takes time. So we want to practice this with patience. Affirmations rewire the brain. They create new narratives. They align you with your truth, and they offer clarity of intention.
And for many people, well, first, I would invite everybody to take one day and keep track of your thoughts. Write them all down. And for many of us in this society and in this current world and the state that the world is in, and our old programming and our own personal traumas and childhoods and whatever we have, you'll see that most of those thoughts are actually kind of negative. And we don't even realize it because it's playing in the background. And so that's why when we do affirmations, for so many of us in the beginning, it feels so inauthentic. It feels like a root canal. Some of my clients have a very difficult time beginning the affirmations, looking in the mirror saying, I love you, I am love. It doesn't feel good. And the reason it doesn't feel good in the beginning is because it's a new neural pathway and it's not familiar to us. And, and Dr. Victoria touched on that. It takes time. It really takes time. So, to anybody out there doing the affirmations, and I'm speaking to myself too, keep going. And this does bring us into the new habits. This is another thing that's really, really important. As we said earlier, intention without integration, it's dead in the water. It's just a seed with no water. The new habits are the water too for the affirmations. So if affirmations are, we love metaphors here. If affirmations are the buttons, forming new habits is the elevator. A button without you pressing it is just a button. If you press it, you have a destination. So one does not work without the other. Creating newer and healthier habits will not only boost your self-confidence, but will also change the trajectory of your life. So even a small change, if you're walking in a certain direction and you change your trajectory by even 2 degrees, if you keep walking, you will end up in a completely different location. So little changes can bring really big results. New habits can stimulate curiosity, provide choice and a sense of freedom, offer novelty and therefore dopamine hits, and change your life.
And last but not least, creative play. Microdosing can really help align you with the energetic flowing possibilities of the present, a space to playfully create. Obviously, macrodosing also absolutely puts us into this really wild, playful state. Play is spontaneous, it's joyful, and it's one of our most integrated brain states, returning us to homeostasis. Not enough adults play. Not enough adults play. We do not make time for play. Playing can look like I go into the kitchen and I don't follow a recipe and I just pull out some ingredients and see what happens, right? It's spontaneous and it's creative. It stimulates your intuition. It feels effortless, blissful, energized, and present. I don't know if anyone here plays music, plays an instrument, but when you're in tune with your instrument, when you're integrated with your instrument, time doesn't exist. and you are just in this effortless, blissful place. It can help you lose track of time, dissipating anxieties and insecurities, and it stimulates awake aliveness, which is really what we're striving for.
Yeah. And you cannot be in this space and be in overthinking at the same time. So really, many of us are seeking to not overthink. So this is really ultimately the holy grail of what we're all looking for, is to be globalized in our brain like this, to be able to be totally present, to regain the childlike wonder that we had before all the responsibilities and the trials and the tribulations. I think we're all looking to regain that sense of creativity and play and that childlike state of innocence and presence. So
yeah, we have to make time for it.
Yeah, it's super important.
So I know we are low on time, but I just want to quickly put us into an integrated state so that we can practice what this feels like. And so if you would take a right hand, and I want you to find that place under the sternum. For women, it's like right under where the bra is, right at, the stomach. It's a little below and center of the heart. And I just want you to put your hands there for a minute. Find that place in your body, find a comfortable seat. And I want you to take a deep breath. And then I want you to exhale through the mouth. And continue doing that. Inhale, exhale through the mouth. And as you're breathing, you can feel a lot of movement happening under your hand. And if you want to close your eyes, you can. But as you're breathing, I want you to be aware that there's a diaphragm below the hand. And as you inhale, the diaphragm drops and makes room for your lungs to expand. And then as you exhale, the diaphragm comes back up and it actually creates a little shelf for your heart to rest in. So we inhale, the diaphragm moves out of the way, stretches, makes room for the lungs to take in lots of air. Exhale, the diaphragm comes back up and gives the heart a place to rest. Inhale, open up the diaphragm, open up the lungs. Exhale, feel the heart resting on the diaphragm. And as you breathe naturally, you could either keep your hand there and place your other hand on your heart. I want you to hold some awareness of how much cooperation is happening between the diaphragm, the lungs, and the heart. And as you take a couple of breaths here, hold awareness of all of the movement and collaboration that's happening all the time in your own body. And bow your head in honor of the wisdom of your body. That wisdom is you, that collaboration is you. And thank your body for showing you those really beautiful, vital points of collaboration, points of integration, harmony between organs. And as you're ready, you can open your eyes and lift back up. And as we go into the body like that, we can actually get to integration pretty quickly. And so I hope you all had an experience of integration in that moment and have a better sense of what that means. And we have some time for a discussion. We want to thank you from the bottom of our hearts, from that point where the diaphragm touches our hearts. We want to thank you. And please feel free to contact us with any questions. We're here to help. Thank you.